So I understood from a very early age that if you wanted justice, you were going to have to fight for it. The second people believe that they are capable of something greater, then things very quickly start to change.
I love to talk about the tax dodgers.
My name is Carol Wells. I'm the founder and executive director of the Center for the Study of Political Graphics, which is an archive of more than 80,000 human rights and protest posters going back to the mid-19th century. Poster artists, they may be extremely talented, they may have the professional art training, but a lot of time they don't have the months and months that a corporate campaign will have to come up with, we need this campaign. And so the artists really have to move quickly. One of the ways they do this, and it's very effective, is to take something that is familiar to people, like an advertisement, and alter it in a way that makes people do a double take. And a perfect example of that was the use of the very popular children's book, Goodnight Moon, to be transformed into Goodnight Bush, New York Times bestseller, by Eric Origin and Gan Golan.
My name is Gan Golan. I am an artist and author and direct action street theater artist. I'm currently based in New York City and Brooklyn. I'm the co-author and artist of the book Goodnight Bush, as well as the co-author and art director of the graphic novel The Adventures of Unemployed Man. With a friend of mine, Eric Origin, we created a whole bunch of superheroes that were meant to address different parts of the economic crisis. So we had characters like Unemployed Man, who looked like Superman after he'd been sleeping on your couch for a couple months. We had the Master of Degrees, who was a grad student superhero whose power was that he was super overeducated for any of the jobs that were actually available. Wonder Mother, who is like Wonder Woman, only she had to fight supervillains with a baby strapped to her chest. So on Halloween, we staged a superhero versus Wall Street showdown, where we had all these superheroes who represented the different ways in which people were struggling to survive go and confront the economic supervillains that were controlling our economy. So we staged this giant superhero brawl right in the middle of Liberty Square in Zuccotti Park and invited all the press and just got a ton of coverage, and then marched in masks and costumes straight to the New York Stock Exchange, which at that time was heavily fortified.
People are being required to show their IDs before they come onto Wall Street.
And it was a place where protesters weren't even allowed to get within blocks of that location. And because we were wearing costumes on Halloween, we just walked straight in. We thought we'd have maybe 30 seconds to stage our action before we got kicked out. We were there for about an hour and did whatever we wanted. Took a whole series of interviews and photo shoots, and all of that stuff ended up in the press all across the country the next day. I came from a really long lineage of people who understood that in order to change things, you really had to fight for justice. Part of that is because they were immigrants who were incredibly mistreated when they came to this country. One of my uncles was actually arrested during a protest, then disappeared and was never seen again. So I understood from a very early age that if you wanted justice, you were going to have to fight for it. While I was at MIT, the war in Iraq actually started, and students wanted to demonstrate that they were not just morally opposed to this war, but that they didn't want their research and all of their brilliant ideas to be part of this war machine. So we deployed different creative techniques, everything from putting banners on balloons so that they couldn't be taken down, to the day that the war started, we actually got a Brazilian samba band to march through the halls of the university, and it was so loud that even those who chose not to walk out of their classrooms had to leave because class was essentially over. And what I found was that all the experiences I had witnessing creative action, I suddenly could take to a whole other level when I was at MIT and actually take a larger role as an organizer, planning a lot of these actions. So while I was at MIT, I actually used some of the funding that I was supposed to use for field research to go on a trip to Mexico, where the World Trade Organization was having its next meeting in Cancun. And this meeting was going to be the next big showdown between corporate capitalism on a global scale and the international movement of everyday people who are trying to stop it. So I began working with local activists and the indigenous community, which is largely Mayan in that area, to construct a giant art project. And the idea we came up with was a giant protest puppet, but this one was going to look like a giant Mayan god that had ripped itself straight out of the earth, as if the ancient ruins had come back to life in order to go kick the WTO's ass. And it was about 20 feet tall, and it looked like it was carved out of stone. And it was designed in such a way that it could actually point in a particular direction and then turn its head and raise its other arm and call masses of people to follow it. And what we found is that when it actually went onto the streets during the demonstrations, which had about 10,000 people there, the effect that it had on the crowd was far more powerful than we even expected. And whatever direction this puppet was facing, thousands of people started moving in the same direction. We realized that the power that this puppet had over the crowd was actually more power than we wanted or really knew what to do with, but it showed how much influence a single work of art could have. So now when we hit the streets with just as hard-hitting a message, but with costumes and with all this funny stuff happening, we are getting a totally different reaction, and we're actually able to make our message more visible to the public than if we were just shut down. And I think that stuff really worked because it was fun, it was entertaining, it was using culture that people already liked and understood. So rather than trying to depress people with these realities, we realized that trying to elevate their spirits through humor actually allowed them to engage the issues and have the conversation that we wanted to have about what was causing all these problems. So we wanted to find a way to talk to people about big issues like income inequality.
Wow.
And the way that corporations have totally distorted our political system, but we needed to find a really fun, accessible way to talk about it. So we thought, what are some things that people really like? Well, people like sports. It's actually more popular than superheroes. People understand taxes because we all have to do it. And so we put those two things together in a project called the Tax Dodgers.
Losers pay taxes, we take rebates. Never pay nothing, not federal or state. So we shoot for the loophole.
And what it is, it's a baseball team made of the wealthiest corporations in the country that many people are surprised to learn pay absolutely nothing in taxes. And in fact, not only do they pay nothing, many of them are getting billions of dollars in rebates on taxes they never even paid. And that strikes the everyday person, whether they're liberal or conservative, as so incredibly unfair, they start to ask questions about how is that even possible? They're paying less than I am. They're paying less than you are. And because of that, we don't have enough to keep this country running. So now is the most important time for us to take the tax dodgers out into public space and use our art form to show people how these wealthy corporations are robbing them. Next time on Voice of Art.
Corporations are people, and money is speech. Corporations have a tremendous amount of power these days.
Causing trouble is one of the most important things you can do as a citizen.
We're planning for this really big event that's coming up, and as usual, we've bitten off more than we can chew.
We suck at baseball, so like that could be a problem, but yeah, we'll see.